When photographing a snowy landscape scene, we often face a problem. Everything turns white and the scene just loses its impact. What we really need is some texture in the snow. So in this video, I'll show you how to edit snow photos using tools in the Nik Collection to produce better results. Here's the starting image that I have open in Photoshop. I'm using the Nik Collection as a plugin to Photoshop, but it can also be used standalone and in other photo editors like Affinity Photo. When I'm working in Photoshop, I usually launch the Nik tools from the Nik Selection palette. The best tools for editing snow photos are found in Nik Color Efex, so I'll click that. I now see the image open in Nik Color Efex. On the left side of the interface, I have the filter library where I can select the filters that I want to apply to this image. Now, I can use several of these filters to edit snow photos to add texture. The first one we'll look at is the ClearView filter. This is typically used to remove haze in a landscape scene. It works by adding contrast in the highlights whilst also darkening the lighter tones. To add the filter, move the mouse pointer over it in the list. Then when the plus icon appears, click it. Always remember to click the plus icon because if you click the filter instead, it will replace the currently selected filter that's on the right of the interface. Now at the moment we don't have any other filters applied to this image, so it doesn't matter, but it's still a good habit to get into. Now watch what happens to the snow when I increase the intensity slider. We see the texture begin to appear. Of course, the only problem now is that this is also making the trees clearer, so we lose the misty appearance. You can see the effect if I turn the filter off and on by clicking the tick icon. To fix this, let's remove the filter from the top part of the scene. We can do this using a control line. The control line is a selection tool that allows us to control where the filter's effect is visible. To add a control line to this filter, we click the icon and then position the mouse pointer over the image where we want to add it. But we won't just add a control line because we want to use it to remove the filter from the top part of the image. To do that, we need to add a negative control line, which we can do by holding down the Option key on a Mac keyboard. If you're using a Windows PC, that's the Alt key. When we do this, we see a minus sign next to the mouse pointer. This tells us that we're adding a negative control line. I can then click and we see the control line added. Then if I drag while still holding down my mouse button and the Option key, I can resize the feathered area of the control line. And I can also control the rotation. Now that the control line is in place, if I turn the filter off and on, you can see that it's mainly affecting the foreground, although there is still some effect on the trees to a degree. To see why this is happening, let's turn on the mask view. This displays the mask for the control line we've just added, telling us where the filter effect is being hidden. Where you see white on this mask, the control line hides the effect, but it's still being applied where the mask is darker. To fix the mask, we can move the luminance slider to the left. This tells the control point to remove the filter from all areas, no matter how light or dark they are. If I turn off the mask view and then hide the filter, you can see it only affects the foreground. Now we can adjust the intensity slider to produce the texture in the snow that we want. Let's hide that filter now, because I want to show you a second filter that can be used to process snow photos. It's the Tonal contrast filter. As before, move the mouse pointer over the filter in the filter list so that the plus icon appears. We can then click the icon. This adds the filter which now appears on the right side of the interface. You can immediately see its effect using the default settings. While this improves the texture of the snow, you may find it doesn't suit your particular image. It really depends on the tones in the image as to what settings work best. But before we jump to adjusting the slider controls, we need to check the effect of changing the contrast type in the drop-down. If we open the drop-down and move our mouse over each item in the list, we can preview the effect. For this image, I'll select the balanced option. Like the previous filter that we looked at, this adjustment affects the entire image, but I only want it to affect the foreground. We can do this again using a control line, but rather than using a negative control line on the sky, I'll use a regular control line to select the foreground. Again, I'll also turn on the mask view so that I can see what's being selected by the control line. I'll then adjust the luminance slider to control this. When I'm happy, I'll turn off the mask view so that I can see the image again. Now I can adjust the different contrast sliders to achieve the look that I want. When I think it looks about right, I'll hide it because there's another filter that we can use to edit snow photos. This one is the Pro Contrast filter. When I move my mouse pointer over the filter, we see the plus icon appear. I can then click to add that as a new filter to the image. The filter has two contrast controls. The correct contrast slider is a traditional type of contrast adjustment which makes light areas lighter and dark areas darker. But the dynamic contrast adjustment is special. Watch what happens to the white areas of the image when I increase it. We now see texture appearing. That's because it's increasing the contrast in the light areas, but it doesn't affect the lightest tones and in fact makes things a little bit darker. However, like the other filters, it also affects everything, so I want to restrict it to the foreground. I'll do that again by adding a control line to the foreground area. I'm using quite a large feathered area this time to produce a more blended and gradual effect on the scene. We've now looked at the three filters that can add texture to a snow photo to improve it. All we really need to do now is apply all three together. While we can use these in isolation, we often get a better result by applying two or three of the filters together. When I switch on the other filters again, we can see a huge improvement. It's then a matter of refining the settings in each filter so they work well together and don't create too strong an effect. Now the Nik Collection is something that I use in a lot of my landscape photography. To see an example of how I included it in my workflow, watch this video next. Thanks for watching today, and I hope this video helped you edit your snow photos. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so, and visit my website for more Nik tutorials. I'll see you soon for another video.